Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We begin with mystic song by Sri Swami Lalitananda. Or a change. Okay. Good.
We'll have a bhajan sung by Parvati.
Everybody join in.
Jai Ganesha, Jai Ganesha, Jai Ganesha Pahima. Shri Ganesha, Shri Ganesha, Shri Ganesha Rakshamam. Jai Ganesha, Jai Ganesha, Jai Ganesha Pahima. Shri Ganesha, Shri Ganesha, Shri Ganesha Rakshama. Sharavana Bhava, Sharavana Bhava, Sharavana Bhava Pahima. Shri Subhaman, Subhaman, Rakshamam. Sharavana Bhava, Sharavana Bhava, Sharavana Bhava Pahima. Subramanya, Subramanya, Subramanya Rakshamam.
Jaya Saraswati, Jaya Saraswati, Jaya Saraswati Pahima. Shri Saraswati, Shri Saraswati, Shri Saraswati Rakshama.
Jai Saraswati.
Jaya Saraswati, Jaya Saraswati, Jaya Saraswati Pahimam.
Jaya Saraswati, Jaya Saraswati, Jaya Saraswati Pahimam.
Shri Saraswati, Shri Saraswati, Shri Saraswati Rakshama.
Shri Saraswati, Shri Saraswati, Shri Saraswati Rakshama.
Jaya Guru Shiva Guru Hare Guru Ram. Jagat Guru Param Guru Sat Guru Sham. Om Adi Guru Advaita Guru Ananda Guru Om. Shit Guru Shit Gana Guru Shit Maya Guru Om. Om Adi Guru Advaita Guru Ananda Guru Om. Shit Guru Shit Gana Guru Shimaya Guru Om. Gurunatha, Shri Gurunatha, Jai Gurunatha, Shivananda. Shivananda, 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 Satgurudevo.
Shivananda, Gurudeva.
Jyotirmayananda, 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 Shri Gurunatha. Jyotirmayananda, 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 Shri Gurunatha. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namo Narayanaya, Om Namo Narayanaya, Om Namo Narayanaya, Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Narayanaya, Namo Narayanaya, Om Namo Narayanaya.
We are recording from the ashram of our revered Guru, Pujya Atman Sri Swami Jyotirmayananda in Miami, Florida. Today is September the 2nd, 2018, Sunday evening, and tonight Swamiji will be lecturing on Srimad Bhagavad Gita. This is series 2018, class number 14. And now, Pujya Atman Sri Swami Jyotirmayananda.
Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kansa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Bande Jagadgurum. Om. Adorations to Lord Krishna, the preceptor of the universe, destroyer of the forces of darkness, bestower of immortality. Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, and verse number is 54. And we are beginning with called Sthita Prajna Prakaranam, the topic of the enlightened sage. Who is the enlightened sage? That's the whole purpose of all religions and philosophies. The goal, what is the ideal that you gain. And just to break you a little news, that today is actual Janmashtami. So we are offering this whole talk in adoration to Lord Krishna. And that's his best of his talks. Arjuna asks the question, Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhisthasya keshava sthitidhi kim prabhasheta kim asita vrajeta kim. Arjuna asked, O Krishna, what are the characteristics of the sage who is established in samadhi? How does he of steady wisdom sit? How does he speak? How does he walk? This I have touched upon before. Now don't take it literally. People do that. And to some extent it's perfectly okay. What type of clothes does he wear? He puts his garland, and how does he put it? I'm joking. Sitting means, what is your root support? What is your real, speaking in a gross language, the real gut? Gut source. And that depends upon your understanding. What is your heart-based understanding? And that understanding comes to climax if you have attained enlightenment. How does it look like, that type of understanding? That's what you need to know. Arjuna has asked, how does he sit? You should also understand that it also implies that one who is enlightened is not always sitting all the time. Moving around and then coming to sit, there's no contradiction. Put in simpler terms, yoga terminology uses sthiti and avastha. Sthiti is your deeper understanding, and that from there you don't shake. Avastha, your moods, your many other changes occur, and they are perfectly normal. Spiritual enlightenment is not to make you rigid in your personality, but flexible. A tree shakes around. That allows this tree to have much more joy and roots much more strong. Only thing the tree should not do is to break down with every wind that blows. So life that has attained the highest goal continues to have its shaking appearance. And the shaking appearance allows higher knowledge, advanced knowledge to be disseminated. If a tree has a lot of fragrance, the more it shakes, better its fragrance goes, oozes. So, the more stories in the life of a sage, the more people are inspired. That's how does he sit. And how does he speak? Again, speak is expression. Of course, normally speak is what you say by your tongue. And that has a profound aspect. All great sages have brought out words of profound wisdom. But speak does not imply just the words, verbal. Speak means how do you express yourself. Sometimes you are not speaking, and yet your close relatives, they feel you are very joyous, and they feel very happy, though you are not speaking. They are very cozy comfort. And sometimes you are speaking a lot. People are on their nerves. I don't know what you are leading to. So, when I see so many statues of Buddha, really calm. Even though the statues are speaking to you. All the religious figures, Christ, Buddha, Krishna, Rama, their statues, as if they are radiating knowledge, they are constantly talkative, they are eloquent. So, saintly life is a very talkative life with divine eloquence. When he doesn't talk, that inspires a person. He talks, that inspires a person. When he is angry, it inspires a person. When he is not angry, then it inspires a person. So all expressions are talks. How does he talk? How does he express? And how does he walk? How do you conduct yourself? You talk in one way and walk another way. If you walk your talk, they're more advanced. So how does he conduct himself? Sometimes great teachings come out by people, but in their daily life, how do they conduct? That gives a profound inspiration. Now, with this question, now Lord Krishna begins. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmanyevatmana tushta sthita prajna tadochyate. O Arjuna, when a man thoroughly renounces all the desires of the mind and is satisfied in the self, by the self, he is called a man of steady wisdom. So quickly it is said. Now we have to understand the role of desires. Every individual, every aspirant faces three challenges: mala, vikshepa and avarana. Mala, gross impurities, which means you are overcome by gross sentiments, anger, hate, jealousy, revenge, all types of perverted desires. That's mala, that's called karkat, garbage, involved in karmic process. Every individual gathers a lot of garbage. You should grab your garbage and throw it away. Don't be grabbed by the garbage. So, desires in your mind go in three directions, dealing with the garbage, anger, hate, etc. The mind becomes too narrow-minded. Then we sometimes live years after years just waiting for your revenge to be fulfilled. Garbage has grabbed you. That means keeping a desires, moving towards maintaining your impurities. Desires that do not remove your impurities, but they are led by your impurities. Those desires. Then there is desire in another level. Desire to fulfill three eshanas. Eshanas are first, putreshana. Everyone wants to have a family and children and cozy, comfortable life in the world. That's called putreshana. Everyone wants to be very rich, so that even your children and grandchildren are secure in this world. It's called vitteshana. And then everyone wants to have a lot of popularity. Mm-hmm. Whether you are fit for your popularity or not doesn't matter. called location. So everyone has desires in that. And all this creates in your mind countless distractions, vikshepa. Then comes a stage, you study scriptures, but don't assimilate the teachings. And your mind goes after, having read Kundalini Yoga, chakras, and the benefits that you get when you control a certain chakra, control an element, and then you go after those benefits, siddhis. Siddhi to know, before you speak anything, know what you are going to say. I'm joking, but not joking at the same time. Countless siddhis have been captivating the minds of people all the time. You want to know your future. Nothing should be hidden before you. You want to materialize and dematerialize, disappear and appear. This is fulfilled by your iPhones these days. And sometimes, practicing sadhana, people get amazing experiences. Experiences of forecast, experiences of gaining insight into certain project in a very profound way, all that. But what happens with that insight, one develops the inflated ego, that I am the greatest one in the world who ever did this, as if you have studied everyone. And when you speak so loudly, it's like a donkey shouting hard, I'm not a donkey. So that type of desire, to hold on to various siddhis, powers. All these desires that support kleshas, afflictions. Let me remind you again, afflictions, there are 5 points. Ignorance, that's the root source of all misery, ignorance, not to realize who am I. Asmita, a deluded notion of I am in every individual. What you think of yourself is not the yourself, but you want to hold on to it. Raga, attachment, based on egoism, you want to hold on to things that please your ego, and hate those things that do not please your ego, dvesha. And raga, dvesha movements, they create karmas. And karma bring the soul to embodiment. And in embodied state, there is a constant fear of death. Mortality becomes the most overpowering source of fear. So desires of your mind that sustain all these illusions, when all these are moved away and you have absolute freedom from mala, gross impurities, from vikshepa, all distracted emotions and subtle desires. And your knowledge has become absolutely a revelation, I am that. Then that's called the sitting chair for the sage. How does he sit? At this stage, let me give you a further extension to this. Vedantic scriptures speak of 7 points. First, every soul is in the stage, is gripped by ignorance, avidya. Every soul, that means as long as you are not enlightened, you are gripped by ignorance. You do not have that revelation. Every soul is like a reflected sun in a jar of water. A reflected sun, the predicament of the reflected sun, compared to the real sun. Can you imagine the difference? And in spite of all this big difference, the difference is being caused by illusion. The reality, that the reflection is not a reality. Its essence is the sun. The soul in you is a reflection in your mental process. Through your own mind, you figure out, how am I, who am I, etc. When you go to sleep, you don't care. Who am I? Where am I? So then, therefore, the profounder understanding, what is behind your I am, that I am that is shaking through the waters of your mind, that I am is the sun that knows no shaking at all. So, everyone has that, every soul is gripped by ignorance. And what ignorance does? It brings about non-discrimination in your mental process. Non-discrimination is the mind is unable to separate truth from falsehood. Your mind is constantly going after things without a clear understanding what is permanent and what is transient, what is the self truth, what is not self. That understanding means you are progressing. If that understanding is lacking, then no matter how many things you attain and all the success, without that subtle understanding, all this becomes kind of a big distraction. So because of this non-discrimination, what happens? Vikshepa. Mind goes after so many things, distracted desires. Now, if you go through sadhana, your understanding begins to change from kumati to sumati, from wrong understanding to right understanding. That's why in prayers in Hindu culture we all say, Sabko sanamati de Bhagavan. Wo Bhagavan gives sanamati, right understanding to everyone. There is no gift greater than promoting sanamati. And that's taken up by jnana yajna. So then, this distracted state of mind which keeps the soul bonded with the world. Now, if you have gone through satsanga, study of scriptures, you gain paroksha jnana. Paroksha jnana means if your intellect has studied the scripture and has agreed with it, you have no contradiction, intellectually you have understood it. That stage is called paroksha jnana, indirect knowledge. And as you continue, knowledge becomes aparoksha jnana, direct knowledge. When your intellect gains transformation, your intellect is like a caterpillar. Caterpillar knowledge has many aspects. But when caterpillar turns into butterfly, or think of a swan egg that turns into swan, if you want a better simile, then that's called intuitive knowledge. As a result of aparoksha jnana, indirect knowledge, you gain absolute satisfaction. That satisfaction is called fulfillment of all desires, called nirankush tripti. In that state, atmanyevatmana tushta, your contentment is not based on anything external. Contentment of a human being is based on healthy body, wealth, good house, good relations, longevity, and so many things. So, whenever you are contented, there is a tail to it. But when you have tailless contentment, contentment doesn't tell stories, storytelling. Then it is Paramatrix, absolute contentment. All this is profound topics, and you go on gaining it by swadhyaya. Not easy to understand. Just to give you insight in the sense profound, you are watching a cinema show, your taste for the show is based upon what the show brings out to you. And you go on expecting that you should have a better show. But while the show goes on, your mind is constantly in a state of agitation. It's not calm because you're expecting things to happen. But when you realize that all the show you are seeing, they are just entertaining your mind, they are not realities. The reality behind the show is screen. That screen remains the same. The show may bring about thunder, storms, hurricanes, eruptions, wars, all that. Or it may bring about all amazingly festivities and a lot of rejoicings. But the screen remains just the same. So if you are wise, You enjoy all that with a mind that doesn't shake, a mind that remains unaffected because nothing is happening. If you develop that state, watching the show more like the director of the show, then you are simply amused. You go on giving a good direction, how to make the show better. But nevertheless, that becomes the role of advanced state of enlightenment. The world becomes a show. And real knowledge, nothing exists. Screen alone is, which is the I am, ahamasmi. Brahman alone is. Satchidananda. I am absolute existence, absolute consciousness, absolute joy. Again, I remind you with those two terminologies, bhava pratyaya, pratyaya bhava. You are depending upon the world of projections. That's called bhava pratyaya. Presence of projections, one side, absence of projections on the other side. Absence of projection is called pratyaya bhava. Projection abhava. With projection, without projection. And that, if you become deeply involved, your intellect can begin to understand these points. But it's not a simple matter. But the more you understand with clarity, it gives you more nourishment to your sadhana. You have more strength, more patience. Dukkheshva nudvignamana sukeshu vigata spriha vitaraga bhaya krodha sthitihir muni ruchyate. He who is not agitated in the midst of sorrowful conditions and who is devoid of craving in the midst of pleasant circumstances, who is free from attachment, fear and anger, such a person is called a sage of steady wisdom. These are profound points. And let me give you a little suspense. He who is not agitated in the midst of sorrowful conditions. First point to understand, देह धरे का दंड है सब काहू को होए. Once you have entered the embodiment, certain things you cannot avoid, no matter what type of embodiment. Come to a very divine family or ordinary family or enlightened people. Once you have gone into with the body, you cannot stay pocket size. you have to grow. All things you loved as a baby, now you have to transcend them. Then as you grow, you have to outgrow many of your habits. Allow yourself to be educated. And so forth. Janma, mrityu, jara, vyadhi. You face the challenge. First, you've already gone through birthing process. Now you are growing, aging process. And you don't have to age. The third one is constantly there. Vyadhi. Disease can come at any stage, from baby stage to the last stage. And death itself. All these create a tremendous problem in every individual. And every individual tries to run away from all these problems. Keep the mind so busily involved in what is considered joyous that all this doesn't matter. That's what the general psychology is when the people go after big processions, which is fine in itself, but not completely fine, because that's just like trying to resolve your problems by going to a drunken house. The resolution comes, of course, by entering into satsanga, gaining insight into how to handle challenging situations of your life. Without going to further details, at this stage, Lord Krishna is speaking of the highest level. He was not agitated in the midst of sorrowful conditions. Dukkeshu anudvignamana. All world experiences come under the category of dukkha. Dukkha means pain, misery, sorrow, grief. All philosophies deal with. There is pain in the world, that's 4 Arya Satyani, 4 noble truths. That there is pain, no matter what you gain in the world. Your success is not dependent upon all that you have gained and achieved. Your success depends upon the internal enlightenment that has occurred within your heart. So now coming to the 4 points, the pain, that should be recognized by people, the first diagnosis. Sarvam dukkham vivekina. The more clarity comes in your mind, greater is your understanding of the disease of the world process. And that disease comes because of the predicament of the soul coming into the cycle of birth and death. Not one time, again and again. Bhava chakra, bhava vyadhi, the disease of the world process. And just to enumerate the 4 points, there is disease, there is the pain, recognizing it, and there is the end of pain. Pain is not normal, it is not divine, it is not in divine scheme to stay on. Pain is something like your headache must go away and your head must be clear. Pain is like darkness. Darkness must go away. And that's the good news. There is end of pain. Now comes the question, what are the methods? First, to understand what has caused the pain. Pain is called heya, that which is to be abandoned. Heya hetu, what has caused this ignorance? Those points we have already covered, your impurities, mala, vikshepa, so many subtle desires, and so forth. You go on studying that, what causes bondage. And since there is an end, what is the method of attaining the end? Hanopaya. And that method is called what you are studying, sadhana. And here the sage who has attained enlightenment, he doesn't have to go back on this study. He has already finished the end of pain. Now, how does that saintly stage, what are the characteristic signs? He who is not agitated in the midst of sorrowful conditions. All scriptures go on giving you that example. The Ramayana gives you the best of example with Rama. Prasannatam yana gata abhishekata tathana mamle banavasa dukkata mukhambuja shri raghunandanasya me sadastu sa manjula mangala prada. What do you understand? The cheerfulness of Rama's face, the serenity of Rama's face did not diminish when he was told by King Dasharatha that you are going to be, rather, first stage, it did not brighten up. His serenity stayed same. When the king told him you are going to be heir apparent to the throne. All subjects love you, you are going to be the king, king of kings. Imagine, compared to worldly mind, where even a handful of petty things make the mind so. And here being given a tremendous honor and power. Rama simply stays calm, as if nothing has happened. And then, while whole Ayodhya is celebrating, Rama is going to be the king, Rama, Kaikeyi creates a different plot. And Rama is asked, same Dasharatha brings Rama and says, of course he doesn't say so much, but Kaikeyi, who has planned Rama to go away, speaks up that King Dasharatha has given me words, and accordingly you must go to the forest for 14 years. And Rama simply stays. And if at all, he gives a little expression. How fortunate. I will be having satsang with sages, saints and sages. In other words, from a very simple and broad point of view, develop that type of heart. Firstly, and bring God in your heart, bhakti. Understand everything that happens in your life. A motherly vision is guiding you with a loving attitude. And so, while facing adverse situation as well as positive situation, look up to your mummy. And you understand your mummy is more pleased if you handle things wisely. So positive has come, and you do not become too messed up with positive. Ice cream has given to you, and too happy and push it out of your face. Keep looking at the mother. She tells you how to take it in a nice way. Adverse challenge has come. You are on a slippery ground and you have to straighten yourself. Don't lose your patience. Look up to the mother. A strength is being emanating from the mother to help you. So that type of inner movement towards God has to develop. If it has not developed, then all spirituality is hollow. And this point has to be hammered in your heart again and again. So read all the scriptures, hear again and again, should intensify what's called Shraddha, faith. And faith becomes more dynamic, it's called Vishwas. When you have Vishwas, your movement becomes dynamic. When you lack Vishwas, it is Vishwas. We live in a world of Vishwas. Go to wishing and washing. Wishy-washy. You wish to go to Hawaii, the next day you washed it. So mind moves on with wish and wash. But not that. It was a Vishwas. And what does Vishwas itself mean? Vishwa, whole universe. Vas, one who is the reality behind the entire universe. There isn't a moment where God is not the reality behind it. So never develop the idea, now since I love God, and God is somewhere up there, how can I reach Him? I pray, but my prayer is very soft. How can He hear it? Try to understand. God is all permeating reality. And that type of attunement with God has to develop. Then Vishwas begins to develop in your heart. And that is the most perfect indication of a successful life. True success, when you have developed Vishwas, trust. And when you are not shaken by adversity and prosperity. Another point, not shaken, at the same time, you are more nourished by both. Adversity teaches you to practice austerity, the joy of experiencing your strength. And prosperity, blessing, the joy of receiving blessing. Practical details are not contradicted. In other words, all practical realities you must handle day by day. But at the same time, at the deeper level within your personality, all these divine insights must enter. What happens? You become wiser in your practical details. You will avoid doing so many projects that is led by your distracted mind. You will go after those projects that are more effective, purposeful. Your mind will have that type of clarity. So it has both aspected movement. Outwardly, in the external world, you will try to avoid those clutters around you that keep your mind distracted. You live a life of simplicity. Simple living, sublime thinking. Vitarag bhaya krodha. Try to understand these 3 points. Rag. Whenever there is agreeable situation, mind becomes fascinated. This is the way it should be. It should be always like that. How can I secure it? And then you come to realize things cannot be secured by your ideas. The world is not moving according to your ego. And you see things moving away, things you have loved so much, relatives, circumstances, etc. And then suddenly your mind begins to think. I will not go into details of that. So there is a sense of fear that I'm going to lose this. How will I exist? And then the mind acts in a foxy way. Let me drive away those obstacles that come to me to take away the things I love. So even if there is no reality, you're already creating anger within yourself, building your muscles. Duryodhana went on practicing mace and let people hammer mace on his own body. It's in Mahabharata. To enjoy his revenge. No, simple point I'm saying, you go on creating in your mind-body set unnecessary stress, preparing for a challenge that is going to come. And that becomes unwittingly, that's the nature of world disease. So 3 points: Vita, Raga, Bhaya, Krodha. Raga, attachment. Fear, Bhaya. Krodha, anger. These 3 create a tremendous agitation in your mind. And if these 3 move away, your mind becomes profoundly prepared for attaining enlightenment or moves towards enlightenment. In the case of one who is enlightened, he is free of these. Because as I have said, if God has been enshrined in your heart, bhakti has entered, and you are experiencing the love of God guiding you, then even when objects that you love come to you, you recognize God is in them. If they go away, God is not going away. And even if you believe in objects, the same God, having taken away some objects, going to give you more. So you are not caught up by your own imagination. So with this I'm going to conclude. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
here to stay, here to stay. More solid than matter, this presence you can never capture its essence. Perception will never prove its existence. If you're searching out there, turn around. Who is searching? Who is found? Here and now is who you are, brighter than the brightest star, brightest star, brightest star. More solid than matter, this presence, you can never capture its essence. Perception will never prove its existence. Just remember to surrender your resistance.
Thank you so much. Nonetheless, singing one of her many original songs, over 100 songs that she used with us. That was one of her special songs. And we'd like to ask Narayan if he would give us a short talk.
Pranam Gurudev. Om Tat Sat, everyone. Tonight I'd like to speak on the second mantra of the second chapter of Kena Upanishad. Now, to give this second mantra some context, I'd like to just reread the first mantra. Now, Kena Upanishad is in the form of a dialogue between the Guru and his disciple. So the first mantra starts with the Guru. And he states, if you think that you know Brahman well, you know very little in reality, because the forms of Brahman that you have known in yourself, as well as in the Devas, or gods, all these together constitute very little of the true nature of Brahman. Therefore, further inquiry is needed for realizing the self. The student then then states, he says, I do not think that I know Brahman well, nor do I think that I do not know him at all. I know Brahman to be different from the known and unknown. Whoever among us knows Brahman understands thus. So the Upanishads are famous for their riddle-like presentation. And 2 points are presented in this particular mantra. One is a reiteration of the fact that Brahman cannot be cognized through our rational mind, through our conditioned mind. And the second is the predicament of the aspirant. Knowing Brahman through inference, but yet not knowing. So how is this possible? I do not think that I know Brahman well, nor do I think that I do not know him at all. Okay. Brahman is beyond name and form, it's beyond concept, it's beyond words. But the Upanishads and Vedanta defines Brahman to be pure consciousness, pure awareness. And it is this pure awareness that is refracted through our mind and senses that gives rise to this world of perception, the world of multiplicity that we experience through our mind and senses on a day-to-day basis. A good way to think of this is to draw an analogy to the sun and the earth. So the sun emits light, light travels through the vacuum of space, it gets refracted through the atmosphere of the earth, and it sheds light on all of the objects, all of the physical objects of this world, right? Now try to imagine that a cloud is blocking your vision of the sun. The sun, being that pure awareness, sheds light onto this earth that we experience through our mind and senses, but we cannot see the sun directly. But to say that we do not know that the sun is there is foolish, right? Because we cannot, I mean, if we were to say that, then there would be no way of knowing that this cloud is blocking our vision, right? But in the same way, we cannot see the sun directly. So we know that there is this awareness, but yet we have no intuitive realization of it at the same time, right? So we simultaneously know that there is this pure awareness, this Brahman, but we do not know him through that intuitive realization. We just know him through our indirect knowledge and through inference. The second portion of this mantra says that I know Brahman to be different from the known and unknown. Right? So this is just a reiteration of the first mantra. That which is known and that which is unknown are products of the conditioned mind, products of the rational mind. There's a difference between intellectual gymnastics and the intuitive realization of that pure awareness. And so the student is actually very advanced, right? He knows this Brahman to be different from the known and the unknown. It's something that's beyond the rational mind. And then he concludes by saying, whoever among us knows Brahman, whoever among us knows Brahman understands thus. Both these points, the predicament of ignorance, that we know Brahman through indirect knowledge and inference, but yet have no direct perception of him, and that this Brahman that is spoken of in the Upanishads and the Vedas is beyond name and form. It's beyond concept. It's beyond the known and the unknown. And a good way to visualize this spiritual process is what Swamiji talked about today, mala, vikshepa, and avarana. So mala are is the gross impurities, anger, jealousy, hatred, right? And these are remedied through karma yoga, selfless service, doing your actions in the form of surrender to God. And vikshepa, which is a distracted mind, is remedied through upasana, which is devout meditation. It's both bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion, and dhyana yoga, the yoga of meditation, both of these two combined. It's known as upasana. And once mala is eradicated and the mind is stilled through the practice of devout meditation, upasana, then the veil of ignorance is removed. The cloud is dissolved, and we can have a direct perception through the intuitive mind of that pure awareness. And we realize that all objects for perception are in fact that pure awareness. And more next time. Thank you, Swamiji. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
To give you a little more time to eat your dinner, I'd like to read you a little bit from our newest book, Mystic Pathways Through the Bible. Last week, I read you a section that is based on Christ's fifth beatitude on the Sermon of the Mount. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. This section of the book is entitled Exemplars of Divine Compassion. And I think you will enjoy some of these stories of examples of divine compassion. To develop true mercy or compassion, re-educate and transform your unconscious. This can be accomplished in various ways, but the most important method is satsanga, or good association. Keep your mind in constant association with the great ideals presented by sages and saints from all religions. Study their lives and understand how divine qualities developed within their personalities and served as a blessing to others. Observe well how such advanced personalities behave towards their enemies, friends, and towards the obstacles in their lives. Sincere effort will give rise to compassion, which will emanate like fragrance from your blossoming heart. This fragrance of compassion will accelerate your path to enlightenment and unity to God. Lord Buddha and Lord Jesus are sublime embodiments of compassion. They lived only to relieve human beings of their deep-rooted maladies. Their acts of compassion and mercy belong not just to the period of time in which they existed, but to all humanity at all times. Recall the powerful story of how Lord Jesus once encountered a lady surrounded by an angry crowd, judging her harshly for her sins. And this is a quote from John. They said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What do you say?" This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. When Lord Buddha first saw misery, he began to reflect upon how misery could be eliminated. He worked on this problem until he attained enlightenment or nirvana. According to the story, one day the young Buddha, or Siddhartha, as he was then called, was out walking in the royal forest when he observed a hunter, shoot a beautiful bird. He picked up the bird and saw that the arrow had pierced its body. Not knowing what pain was, he plucked out the arrow and plunged it into his own body. He felt miserable. Then he began to empathize with the bird. At that time, the hunter ran over to Siddhartha and said, "That's my bird. I shot it and I'm going to cook it. How dare you try to take it away from me?" Buddha replied, "I will not give you this bird, no matter what you do." News of this reached his father, the king, and it was the king who ultimately decided that a person who saves life is better than one who takes it away. So in this way, Buddha was able to keep the bird. This is how Buddha's godlike compassion was kindled. The great sage, Indian sage Valmiki, was a robber in his early days. Through the influence of great sages, he transformed himself and became a devotee of Lord Rama. After a prolonged practice of devotion and samadhi, he emerged as a totally different personality. One who had been so insensitive to others' miseries became so profoundly compassionate in his heart that when he saw a bird being separated from her mate by the cruel arrow of a hunter, he felt an upsurge of compassion. The outward event to him became a mirror reflecting the miseries of all living beings. Inspired by this divine feeling, he composed the magnificent poetic work, the Ramayana, which abounds with amazing literary excellence, poetic sublimity, and mystic insight. If you have studied the Ramayana, you will recall that in this epic scripture, the monkeys and bears fought fiercely with the demons every day. After being crushed, miserably beaten up, and afflicted, they gathered in the evening before Lord Rama. Rama simply smiled at them with his magnanimous divine compassion, and they were all miraculously healed. The demons also felt crushed and battered by the day's end. But when they filed before Ravana, the demon king, he glared at them with his 20 eyes. That's because Ravana had 10 heads, making them feel even worse than before. The secret of Rama's success was his compassion. Though he did not even so much as lay a hand on his monkey and bear warriors, The mere power of his compassionate gaze alleviated their suffering and left them feeling refreshed and renewed. Does that remind you of what happens when we come to satsang with Swamiji? We're the monkeys and the bears. He heals us up. When great sage Gyaneshwar was a boy, he was already well established in the Vedantic vision of non-duality, the vision that all is the self. One day the saint saw several men beating a water buffalo. Noticing the sage, they asked him whether he could feel the blows they were inflicting upon the water buffalo, since according to the sage, the self in the buffalo was the same as his very own self. In response, Saint Gyaneshwar silently bared his back. The same stripes on the water buffalo's back had transferred to him by means of his intense feeling for the suffering animal. It is a most profound virtue to spontaneously feel the sufferings of others, irrespective of their caste, creed, or national origin, human as well as non-human. Sage Gyaneshwar's empathy for the buffalo symbolizes this great divine quality. As we see in these exemplars of compassion, as well as in the myriad of others who continue to bless our lives, the development of true compassion depends upon the revelation of the inner majesty of the divine self. Compassion or mercy is the fragrance emanating from the flower of divine love. It is not dependent upon any circumstantial development. Therefore, the compassion of a sage is his very nature. Like moonlight radiating from the moon, a sage radiates compassion in his surroundings and creates an atmosphere of harmony and peace. Although he may not be doing anything tangible or visible to most people, he is setting up a dynamic movement in the world just by his divine and elevated feeling. And there are a million more treasures in this book. Okay. Swamiji would like to open the floor now to your questions, and he will answer them. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and we'll bring you the microphone. You have to deck Swamiji with technology. Are there any questions? Swamiji, raise your hands.
It's okay.
I'd like to take a moment and to thank you know who, Rajneeshji, for cooking our wonderful dinner tonight. He made the meatball sabji and the rice and the mango yogurt, and of course had help from that wonderful band of leprechauns, karma yoga leprechauns, that help him anonymously in the kitchen when he prepares the food, and we thank him. Also like to remind you that next Sunday, September 9th, at 5 p.m. we'll be celebrating Ganesh Chaturthi. It will be a wonderful festivity celebrating the power and majesty and humor of Sri Ganesh. So join us at 5 for a wonderful lecture by Swamiji and a feast. And recall in Swamiji's lecture, towards the end of his lecture, in his usual humorous way, he said that we must look up to our mommy to help us in overcoming the obstacles of ignorance and of avidya and vikshepa and avarana. Well, actually, that's what's going to happen in a most poetic and profound and delightful way during our study of Navaratri Puja, mother worship. That mommy, the divine mother in the form of goddesses Durga, Lakshmi, and Saraswati. And during those 10 days, they help us work on those obstacles. Ignorance and distraction and the final veiling on our malas help us to see what's going on within us and transform our personalities and emerge victorious, free of them. So try to plan your schedule so that you can join us during those 10 days. They start on Friday, October 5th, and end on Sunday, which is the grand festivity, on October 14th. For the 9 nights, Friday through that Saturday, the 13th, we start at 7 p.m. Swamiji will be lecturing on taking us through these wonderful stories of the Devis within us and how they transform our personalities. A very special time here at the ashram, and there'll be special prasad. So that's starting at 7 for each of those 9 nights. On the 10th night, on the 14th, we will start at 5 p.m. That's the Vijaya Dashmi celebration. And as I've mentioned before, there's a divine rumor coming from the cosmos that all those who attend for 10 days will get enlightened on the 10th day. So try to make it for all 10 days. And the Devi is very merciful, so even if you can't make it all 10 days, you still may get enlightened on the 10th day. But try your best to attend all 10 days. And we have a sign-up sheet outside in the reception area, and Radhika can help you tonight if you have any questions about signing up for that event. Swamiji, before we conclude, Malini reminded me that we have a wonderful, beautiful singer. And maybe she would sing for us to conclude the program.
Good, good.
What is your name? Saraswati. Ah, okay. Could be better here.
Yeah.
Jai Mata Kali, Jai Mata Durga. Jai Mata Kali, Jai Mata Durga. Jai Mata Kali, Jai Mata Durga. Jai Jai Mata Kali, Jai Mata Durga. Ma Kali Durga, Namo Namah. Jai Kali Jai Mata Kali, Jai Mata Durga. Ma. Jai Jai Mata Kali, Jai Mata Durga. Jai Ma. Kali Durga, Namo Namah. Jai Kali Durga, Namo Namah. Jai Mata Kali, Jai Mata Durga. Ma. Jai Mata Kali, Jai Mata Durga. Kali Durga, Namo Namah. Jai Kali Durga, Namo Namah. Jai Kali Kali, Jai Durga Durga. Jai Kali Kali, Jai Durga Durga. Ma. Jai Jai Mata Kalika, Jai Jai Mata Kali. Jai Jai Mata Kali, Jai Jai Mata Kalika, Jai Jai Mata Kali, Jai Jai Mata Kalika, Jai Jai Mata Kali, Jai Jai Mata Kalika, Jai Jai Mata Kali. Jai Jai Mata Kali, Jai Mata Durga. Jai Mata Kali, Jai Mata Durga. Jai Kali Kali, Jai Durga Durga. Jai Kali Kali, Jai Durga Durga. Jai Jai Mata Kali Kama, Jai Jai Mata Kali, Jai Jai Mata Kali Ka, Jai Jai Mata Kali, Jai Jai Mata Kali Ka, Jai Jai Mata Kali Ma, Jai Mata Kali Ka, Jai Jai Mata Kali. Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Kali Ma, Jai Jai. Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma. Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma. Ma. Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma. Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma. Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma. Jai Mata Kali, Jai Mata Durga. Ma. Jai Mata Kali, Jai Mata Durga. Ma. Kali Kali, Jai Durga Durga, yeah. Jai Kali Kali, Jai Durga Durga. Jai Jai Mata Kalika,
I need
Jai
Vinova
Jai
powder.
Mata Kali. Jai Jai Mata Kalika, Jai Jai Mata Kali. Jai Mata Kali, Jai Mata Durga. Jai Mata Kali, Jai Mata Durga. Jai Kali Kali, Jai Durga. Jai Kali Kali, Jai Durga. Jai Kali Kali, Jai Durga Durga. Jai Kali. Jai Jai Mata Kali Kama, Jai Jai Mata Kali. Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma. Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma, Jai Kali Ma. Kali Ma,